The trouble with quotes. If there's one topic in Unix shell programming that gives more confusion and more anxiety to shell programmers, it's the use of the various different types of quotes. Hopefully in this module I will clarify the use of quotes for you, and this confusion will not be severe as for you as it would have been if I hadn't explained it to you. You'll still have trouble with quotes. I have trouble with quotes. Everybody has trouble with quotes. But hopefully you'll have, well, less than most. Let's begin and have a look at what we're talking about here. In Unix shell scripting there are 3 different types of quotes available. Each of these types of quotes is used to surround a piece of text. In other words, you put one quote at the beginning and one quote at the end. And then that text in the middle is said to be quoted. And you always put the same quote at the beginning as you put at the end. There are 3 different types of quotes to choose from. Let's have a look at them. The first is single quotes, which are sometimes known as apostrophes. And you can see the character on the screen there that I'm referring to. We might call it the quote character. So you can put one of those at the beginning of a piece of text and another one at the end of the piece of text, and that text is then said to be quoted within single quotes. Then we've got the double quotes, or the rabbit ears, or quotation marks, or call them what you will, which can also be used to surround a piece of text. And then of course we have what we call the back quote, which is like a single quote except it kind of faces the other way. And if you need to locate the backwards quote on your keyboard, you will probably find it underneath the escape key on the same key as the tilde character, the squiggle character. Now of course on some Unix terminals it could be anywhere, so you'll just have to hunt for it. And as I mentioned before, as a shell programmer sorting out the various nuances of these 3 different types of quotes will bring you many wonderful hours of frustration and bug chasing. If I had $1 for every time I have gotten the number of quotes wrong. But that's all ahead of us. Let's proceed. We'll begin with single quotes. Let's see what single quotes are for. Remember that I spoke to you earlier about special characters used by the shell, and there's a bunch of them, such as the $, the brackets, the asterisk, the hash or the pound sign, and also including things like the space character. So here's how that has to do with single quotes. If you take a piece of text from a shell script and surround it by single quotes, then every character between the quotes is now considered to be a normal non-special character. In other words, all the special characters lose their meanings, including spaces. The only exception to that rule is another quote. Well, another single quote, that is. And the reason for that is the parser that's reading over the script has to know where the set of single quotes ends. If you're wondering what the special meaning of the space character is, it's used to determine that a parameter to a command finishes and the next parameter begins. In other words, it separates parameters from each other. Every parameter to a command is separated from the next one by a space. Now if you put quotes around that, then it is now no longer treated as a special character, so 2 parameters become 1, and so on. So this includes spaces. It even includes new line characters. A new line character in the shell means, okay, I've entered one command, now run that command and present me with another prompt. So if you put quotes around the new line, in other words, you put one quote at the end of a line or somewhere on one line, and then you put a new line, and then somewhere on the second line you put the closing quote. So the new line, the enter key that you hit is somewhere between the quotes, then that new line will not be considered to be the end of the command. The actual command will finish after the second single quote. I think I should probably show you an example of what I'm talking about. I'll just do that quickly. Here we go. So here's the example, echo and then single quote. Here is some, and then I'll press enter. And now look, I get a little angle bracket, which is sort of a second prompt. It's not my original prompt, but it is a prompt of some description. And I'll type in text on, several lines, not loins, lines. And let's see what we get. And we actually get it echoed out on 3 separate lines. So that is indeed possible to do that. So another example is echo the total is nearly $750, and will cause that output to appear on the screen, just as you would expect. Now, there is something interesting about that. Notice that the $sign, the second one, the one next to the $750, the $sign is considered to be a special character. But when you put it inside single quotes, it loses its special meaning and is just then treated as a normal $sign. So, that's the use of single quotes. Now let's have a look at double quotes. So when you think you've got your head around all that, double quotes come along and mess up the picture a bit. Now I mentioned that single quotes actually remove all of the shell's special character features. Now this is okay, but sometimes it's a little excessive. As a convenient shorthand, we may actually prefer some of those special characters to work. And the ones that I'm talking about are using the $sign for variable substitution. So we may like the $sign to remain special. And the backwards quotes, we may like that to remain special as well. And we'll explain about the backwards quotes in the next section. And also certain constructs may be very useful to us as well, like using the backward slash character to render certain other characters non-special. I know this is very confusing, so we're going to have to look at an example. If we surround the given text with double quotes instead of single quotes, then the above 3 different types of features will still remain special, while the other characters will be non-special. So that's actually a typo on the screen in front of you. That should be the other characters are still treated as non-special. Let's look at that example. Now this is a somewhat complex example, so let's go through it character by character. Notice that the text is completely surrounded by double quotes. And then we've got a variable called logname, which is obviously prefixed by a $sign. Now, is logname going to be substituted for the actual variable contents? And the answer is yes, it will, because the $sign remains special inside double quotes. So if the $sign remains special, then some strange behavior is going to happen when we try and print out $1,000. So we actually put a backslash in front of the $sign to get the $sign to be non-special just for that one instance. And then we've got some other text enclosed in back quotes, that date plus %b, and I'm not going to explain to you just at this point what enclosing text within back quotes does, but suffices to say that whatever it does, it's going to continue to do it because back quotes remain special when they're inside double quotes. And of course we have the closing double quote right on the end of the line. Now that will then give us Peter. Well, let's assume Peter is the current login name. So that will, the log name will be substituted there, so we'll get Peter, made $1,000. The $sign comes out beautifully there because we put a backslash in front of it. And then the date plus %b actually gives us November, if we happen to be doing this in the month of November. So it is somewhat complex, the use of double quotes. So let's compare and contrast single quotes with double quotes. They are almost exactly the same, except for the use of the $sign and the use of the back quotes inside the double quotes, or inside the single quotes, as the case may be. So when would you typically use one? When would you typically use the other? Well, I have a personal rule that I use in this particular situation. I usually put things inside double quotes because it gives me the convenience of substituting variables and using back quotes. And the only time I use single quotes is when it's absolutely necessary to, when I absolutely want to guarantee that not a single character inside the single quotes is special. And there are very specific instances where that is useful, such as passing special search parameters to grep or find or something like that. So Maybe as a rule of thumb, keep everything inside double quotes unless it doesn't work, and then perhaps put it in single quotes and see if that fixes anything. So let's move on and look at back quotes. Back quotes actually have got nothing to do with special characters. They are not really related to single quotes and double quotes. Single quotes and double quotes are related to each other, but they're not related to back quotes. So this is what back quotes do. If you put some text inside backward quotes on a command line, that is treated as its own individual Unix command. Everything between the quotes is treated as a separate command and is executed in its own shell. And any output that is generated is substituted into the script line, replacing what was inside the back-quoted text. Now that sounds awfully complicated, and it is somewhat complicated. It does take a bit of getting used to. You might recall that example from the date that I showed you. Let's have a look at some more examples. Now if I was to do this, enclose who pipe to sort inside backward quotes, then what would happen is the who program would run and the output would be sent to the sort program for sorting, and then the output of that would, in this particular example, get stored in the variable called list. It's very handy to be able to do this occasionally, to take the output of a given program and assign it to a variable. Then, if I were to echo out that variable, I would get the following. Fred is on TTY02 and he's on from the particular date, then Peter's on TTY01 on a different date, and Tony's on TTY05 on another date as well, which is almost exactly what you'd expect, except all the new lines have disappeared. So any text that is generated from a command inside backward quotes has all of the new lines removed, or at least turned into spaces, and all of the multiple spaces and multiple tabs are all resolved into a single space. There are very good reasons for it doing that, and you can think of that as a particular nuance or feature of output generated by commands inside backwards quotes. Let's look at some more examples of the back quotes, because it does take a little bit of getting used to. So here's an example. Echo, and then the thing up that I want to echo is the date is something today. Now that something is the result of the date command. So basically take the date command, and I want the date to be in a particular format, MDY, month, day, year. So I want the date command to generate some particular output, and then I want that particular output inserted on that line in place of, well, in place of all the stuff inside the back quotes. So let's see what we get. We get the date is 08/22/01 today. If I ran that again, but this time without the arguments to date, then it would simply say the date is Wednesday, August 27, 1638:42 EST 2001 today. Or I could be a little bit crazier and have nothing to do with dates. I could just mix it up a bit, and I could say ls, or any Unix program could be put there. The date is chapter 2, chapter 4, contacts, log files, blah 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 blah, which of course has nothing to do with today's date, but it is the result of a particular command. Notice that it all appears on one line, simply separated by spaces. So of course things you can do there are myfiles equals back quotes ls, back quotes. Now the ls program has run, but the output from the ls program has, instead of going to the screen, has been assigned to the variable called myfiles. So then of course I could, at any time I could say echo $myfiles, and then I get a list of all the files in this directory. So I hope that's a reasonably good demonstration of the use of the backwards quotes. We're going to use that considerably throughout the remainder of this course. And of course we're probably going to use the single quotes and double quotes even more. So it's vitally important that we have a good grasp of the difference between all of these three things. I would if I were you, probably go back and review this particular module now to make sure it's very clear in your mind, because it will trip you up in the future, I promise you.